Hi guys!
Hello!
We're back. It's the Gilded Greenies again. You guys are familiar with our new series that we have going on here on our Fridays every other week. We have a really great technique for you guys today. We're going to do like a mother of pearl effect so you can kind of get a little sneak peek of this kind of look from a distance. And then also we're going to have this kind of a look where it's like the pearl inlay type of look. And we'll be showing you a little bit of both of those things, and then Sawyer's gonna have some super fun discussion points for us to talk about the whole time.
Oh yeah.
Yay! Happy Friday, by the way.
Oh
yes.
Yeah. Happy Friday.
Okay. Let me just get adjusted for this so that you guys can see it.
Ooh, I'll help with this.
Oh no.
No, we're fine.
All right, you can keep going. He can work on
Yeah,
that.
I'll fix it. You go for
Okay.
it.
That's actually pretty decent. But should we do the split screen this time, or should we do the... Where is it at?
Full screen?
There we go, that one. Where it's in the corner.
Ooh.
We can switch in between too.
So who wants to start out?
I can even honestly keep a hand on it if I need to.
That would suck though.
I mean, yeah, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, I think I
Here,
thought I
here.
saw something
Let's do this, let's do
drop
this.
off of it.
Go ahead and keep on presenting so
Yeah,
you can
I'll
work on
fix it. No
Okay.
no biggie.
I just don't want you to have to hold on to that.
That's
Okay.
honestly not a big deal.
So we're gonna show you this process. As you can tell, I started this one. This one I did do a resin, but we're gonna go over this whole entire frame with resin again. I'm just gonna show you what I did here for the technique. And then after that, we'll probably show you a little bit of what Mackie did on hers as well. So let me just get straight into it. We're actually gonna use stencils today to make sure that it's super easy for everybody to do. This is exactly what I used before, is stencils on this other piece over here. And so I'm just gonna do the same thing that I did on this one, but down here.
And I'm gonna actually take your phone, Sawyer, because you're gonna have to do your stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna switch to here and pull the phone out because we're fine. It's not gonna be shaky.
Oh yes. All I wanted to do was just put a little something.
Okay, just toss that. It's not gonna work.
I might have actually fixed it. But we can figure it out later.
I'll just adjust for this since it messed it up.
If somebody has a hair tie, I could just toss that around there. Perfect. Ames, you just keep going.
Okay. So first we're going to take a pencil and a stencil, and we're just going to be tracing the stencil here.
Don't worry about this being swirly because it's not in view yet.
Okay, good.
I'm just tracing this bird stencil.
Or are you planning on using like a water cup? We might need another one.
Yeah, we might need another
Currently
water
using
cup.
this one as a makeshift stand.
We'll need a new water cup, but I won't need that for a little bit, thankfully. So
It's just
good.
proof of our ingenuity.
Okay, so I have that traced and it's very visible for me and easy to see. I'm gonna trace all my other shapes as well. So I can move this guy out of the way.
Well, while you're doing that, maybe I'll introduce what our topic's gonna be.
That would be fab,
Really?
Soy. Go for it. I'm gonna put you on full screen.
So this topic is actually pretty near and dear to my heart. One of the philosophers we're talking about is actually the philosopher that got me into philosophy. It pulled me away from physics in college, and I started focusing on philosophy because of this philosopher. We'll show you a picture of him later. It's kind of funny looking, but his brain's not. But we're going to talk about two different trains of thought having to do with a topic of philosophy called epistemology, which is the study of knowledge and how you can have it. And I don't know if, are you gonna be doing this for a while? Like, how much time do I have to?
You can keep going, and I
Have
can
to talk.
we'll just talk about it as you go.
Sure. Yeah, well, anyways, so there are two different modes of thought in epistemology during the time period that we're talking about, which is the pre-industrial era, about like 17th, 18th century, and the two modes of thought that we're going to be talking about is rationalism and empiricism. And
That's what it looks like right now. So as long as you're very
let's see.
super
So
centered, we'll
sorry,
probably
I'm
just
a
mostly
little
have to
distracted.
do. Probably just mostly have to
So
do like
rationalism
a
is
single. Yeah, because that has a
is
corner
the train of thought
see?
that you come to knowledge through reason and reason alone, kind of like Sherlock Holmes, if you can imagine that, where he kind of like tries to deduce everything, and he doesn't really care too much about like the way like things usually are. He kind of like sees past that, and he just uses his reason to come to his knowledge about who did the murder or whatever. And but empiricism is different than that, and it focuses on experimentation and our sensory experiences through the world, and that's how we come to knowledge. And we can go a little bit deeper into both of them in a little bit, but we can go back to see where we are in the project.
Yeah, so really quickly, now that I have these shapes, I just used like a petal type of shape, trace out. I'm actually just gonna add little points to the very, very end. Just little triangles, super easy to do.
Oh, that's cool. Wonder if I'm gonna zoom in and get a good. They almost look like little carrots. So it looks
Yes,
like.
they do.
So Ainsley had this little oval stencil. So you can do ovals, and then she's saying all she's doing is creating
Little triangles on the end.
points.
And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to connect these by drawing lines. And just simple, basic lines here. Super easy. We'll thicken these up later. I just need the basic shape.
And you're just using a regular pencil?
Yep, just a regular pencil. This is going to completely cover when we go over it with hematite.
Cool.
You won't see it at all. Just connecting all of them. Super easy. And then I'm just going to go through and thicken it up so it's roughly the width that I want. That top part is a little bit thicker, as you can tell if I move this over here. These are a little thicker, and I only drew a straight line. And so I'm just going to thicken these guys up. Just draw a rough area of where I'm going to paint over them. So it doesn't have to look super pretty or anything. These are going to be completely covered.
I love the idea of tracing because my freehand is mediocre at best. So using stencils and like as like a base, and then kind of just like filling in the details.
Yep.
Works pretty well for me because I don't know if I could draw a bird that accurately right now. Just kind of willy-nilly. I know you guys can.
It's
but
cool that Ainsley is you're making it super nice and easy. Like making it a science instead of an art.
Yeah.
So if you don't feel artistic, you can totally just go for this scientific technique instead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Super
so I
cool.
did that, and that's all you have to do here. The only thing that I'm going to do next is I'm just going to be using a detail brush with hematite, and we're just going to be painting right directly over that. You'll see how I do that. It's basic. You're just coloring in the lines now.
Cool.
Nice. Well, while you're doing that, I'll introduce I'll talk a little bit more about my favorite part of the two topics I was talking about, between rationalism and empiricism. I technically would consider myself a rationalist, and what that means, like I stated earlier, is that I believe that one comes to knowledge from thinking and using reason and logic, and I mean it kind of seems a little obvious, but it's very like at a very like base level, like how you can know something. And another thing for that rationalists think is that when you do obtain knowledge, part of the requirement for that is is having a high level of certainty, which is another thing called infallibilism, meaning that you think that knowledge is obtained when you are completely certain about it, and otherwise you can't have knowledge. It's kind of nitpicky, but I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting. Sorry, I have a frog in my throat. Give me 1 second.
Sawyer's gonna clear his throat, and I was just gonna talk about how fun it is to hear from Sawyer and Ainsley today, because they both have really cool insights. Ainsley's bringing us an amazing project, and Sawyer has some really cool philosophies, and they're all based around imperialism and rationalism. And we were kind of saying that imperialists are kind of like a type of thinking where you kind of aren't born with these capabilities. You only are able to learn things. And we see sometimes we see both of those different personalities in art and with artists in the art community. So some artists are kind of like, oh, you can only get good once you're, well, some people think dead. Yeah. Like a lot of times artists don't get famous until they're dead. But rationalists, and obviously not dead, but they're kind of like, you have to be old to be a master. Mm-hmm. And then rationalists are very like, you're born with these capabilities, and if you just practice and have that desire, you kind of make it happen. And I was gonna liken that in my partner Scott, he's a musician. We were out with his old band, so they tour the country. They're going actually overseas too. They're going to Japan in a couple weeks. And I was just showing them some artwork I did, and they're like, holy cow, how are you so good at art? And I'm like, I'm always so confused by that question, because to me, I feel like everyone has these capabilities in them. Like, I truly feel like that. And it's really just whether you have the desire or not. So I'm probably a total rationalist, because I think everyone's an artist, because I've seen people who are like, oh, I'm terrible at art, or I can't freehand like you. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, but you probably have like a look that you have specifically that you're able to make it just absolutely you. If you had the confidence, you 100% would be an artist. Yeah. Like some people who are artists, like quote unquote artists, they're not that good, but their look is really good. You know what I mean? They're not technically good. So I like to tell people to just have the confidence and just go for it. If you have the desire and like really get over that hump in your mind, you totally can become an amazing artist.
You want to know what that reminds me of? Is like there's a lot of artists out there, right? And they get really upset if you're like, oh, you're so naturally talented, and they're like, no, no, because it like kind of like devalidates their years of hard work. Yeah. But I do think there is a certain amount of natural talent that somebody might start with. But I think a lot of that is not necessarily natural talent, and it's just like, hey, I was really interested at this from a very young age, so I practiced this at a very young age. So somebody like thinking like, oh wow, you're so like amazing, like to Mackie, they're like, oh, that's crazy. But Mackie was doodling on every single notebook possible, like same with me, all the time. And so all the time, and it's like, of course she's good. That's so much practice right there with her line work and stability. And certain amounts of that's going to obviously have to do with fine motor skills. Oh, yeah. But I think, there's definitely truth to both, to the rationalist and the other one. But I definitely agree with Mackie. I definitely lean more rationalist.
I think the difference between an empiricist and a rationalist in terms of like the arts specifically and the skill that you have in the arts would be, yeah, definitely a rationalist would be like, it's something you can kind of just like think your way into like getting really good, and you can like it's like a little bit more natural. You're like born with like the innate ability to be like a good artist.
Right.
Like that's just like
Right.
part of you, like whatever that is that like makes you a good artist. But like an empiricist, like you said, the people that would complain about like that fact devaluating their like years of hard work, they might be a little bit more empiricist in their ideas about things.
Right.
Because they think it's all about their experiences that made them a good artist, more so than their innate ability to be a good artist.
Right.
And and that's another thing too about empiricism, is we've been talking a lot about these like innate things that you're born with. An empiricist doesn't think that you're born with any. It doesn't, like an empiricist would say everyone could potentially be a great artist, right? Because you aren't born with any innate ability, and it's just your experimentation and your
Does
and
that
your,
have
and
to
your
go with
experiences.
just knowledge though? Because I feel like
It
there
doesn't for
there
for sure.
are definitely physical capabilities where it's like, oh, there are limitations within those physical capabilities where it's like somebody who doesn't have great motor skills, right?
Mhm.
It would be very difficult for them to do many forms of art.
Yeah.
But they could become an artist in a different form.
Mhm.
But there's definitely physical limitations. Do you think that's like something that how do you say it?
The empiricist.
Empiricists.
Yes.
I keep on thinking experience, and so I want to say
It's a hard word. It's a hard word. It's not a conventional word for sure.
Lynn is saying, weird, I must be irrational. And my guess is most people on our live that watch probably are all rationalists, for the most part, just based on attitude and your types of comments. That's what I would guess personally.
Yeah, I'd say so too.
So
That's what. Yeah, I like being a rationalist as well.
yeah, absolutely. So I also, on the side, I was going to do a technique with a frame. So I can actually just hold it up since Ainsley still has hers in view. Right now, Ainsley is still just filling in her, and you're probably going to do 2 layers of that?
2 layers. This
Okay.
is my first layer, and I'll be going over with a second soon.
So while Ainsley just works on that, I will show you this frame, which Mom was super excited about yesterday. She worked on. We are using the same basic technique. We are just not going to use the stencil. We're just using it on the complete frame. So what she did is she started with sandstone here, 2 layers of sandstone. And then she goes in with the white gold and moonstone modeled around the frame. And then after that, she is going to use, I'm going to today, the iridescent violet and iridescent green. And we don't have to use the hematite since our frame is already dark. So we'll leave out the hematite. I'm gonna go through all of those steps and I'll show it a little bit on camera as well. I don't have the heat tool, but I might just let them dry in between and then switch views to Ainsley's view. So let me turn the camera over to what I'm doing here. And I'm just gonna be working on this little section and you can still see the rest of the frame. So this is just a wood frame that has a really pretty like scaly texture on it. And at the end, if you can see closer now, like this color and how pretty that is also ending with a resin cure. So I'm gonna do that because Ainsley's is gonna take her just a sec. And then Sawyer can keep talking.
Cool. Well, maybe now's a good time to go into a little bit of the characters that you see in, when I say characters, they're real people. The characters that you see in these different branches of thought, they're not household names, but you might have heard of some of the things that they came up with. The philosopher that got me into philosophy is a rationalist thinker. His name is René Descartes, and he is a French philosopher he was a French philosopher in the 17th century, and he is his most famous term that he coined is a Latin phrase called cogito ergo sum, which translates
Whoa,
to...
say that 12 times fast.
Yeah, seriously.
That's intense.
Do it, try it. We should each say it. Cogito
I don't
ergo
even
sum.
hear what. Say it again.
Cogito
Cogito
ergo
sum.
sum.
Cogito
Sum?
ergo sum.
Yep. Sum.
Cogito
like
ergo
like
sum.
some, but you
Cogito
say
ergo
sum.
sum.
Yep.
Ego sum.
Ego my
Ego
ego.
waffles.
And what that translates to is I think, therefore I am. And this demonstrates his rationalist train of thought very well, because what he did, and he describes it in a book that he wrote called The Meditations on First Philosophy. But essentially what he did is he kind of had like midlife crisis, like most philosophers that have groundbreaking ideas. They like become kind of insane, and then they figure it out from there. But he's like, I'm gonna pretend all of the things that I think I know are like rotten apples in a basket. I'm gonna dump them all out, and I'm only gonna pick up the absolute like ones that I know for 100% sure are not rotten. So, and through that he started doubting everything, and like even up to his own existence. Like he's like, do I even exist? Like one of the things that he brings up is he debates whether or not it's possible for like some like demon overlord to be like deceiving him about his own existence. And or like it's just in a very like weird way, and he's like, no, that's not like fully true. I think by nature of me thinking proves that I exist. And for a while it was the only thing that he thought that he knew, which is why he came up with the phrase cogito ergo sum. And because it's just himself telling himself that as he thinks, just by nature of doing that proves his own existence.
Wow.
Which is really interesting and kind of like brave to do, don't you think?
Yeah, that is crazy.
Because like
Yeah.
it's like he like even throughout like I don't know, things we take for granted every day, like 2 + 2 = 4, like basic math, like he threw out originally.
Right.
And later on he goes to write about how he kind of reasons to think that like a couple more things are true. Specifically like really basic like arithmetic and things like that, but
Real quick, what I'm doing here for my little dabbing technique, I put quite a bit of paint on. I put my first layer down, and then I squeezed a bunch more of the sandstone, and I'm kind of doing like a push and tap type of motion. So really light tapping, and that just spreads out your paint really nice and evenly. So that's all I'm gonna be doing with each of the steps while you talk, so you can keep going.
Cool. Yeah, so that's in a nutshell, which is what Rene Descartes was for a bit. A nutshell. Nutcase maybe. But that's a little bit about Rene Descartes' life and his experiences and what he thought. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are a couple more philosophers for the empiricist side of things. And I think my bias is definitely showing when talking about empiricism, because I also think empiricism is really, really awesome, and I think it has a lot of weight, and it shouldn't be thrown out just because I like the rationalist way of thinking a little bit better. But there's an empiricist that was a little bit later than Rene Descartes. His name was John Locke, and that's probably a name that you've heard. And the idea that we were talking about with John Locke, we actually hit earlier when we were talking about how much people are born with. and what innate ideas they're born with. And another fun thing about him is he also coined a semi-famous Latin phrase. And this phrase is called tabula rasa, and what that translates to is blank slate, which is what he thought we were all born as, with absolutely nothing besides like our like animalistic instincts to like breathe and eat and stuff. But beyond that, he thought all of it came about through like our senses and our experimentation, even as like babies, like figuring out the world. And it's really interesting talking about John Locke and the empiricist side of things, because they were not as staunch about how certain you need to be about knowledge. They thought you could have doubts and still have knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And are you almost done with your second layer, Ainsley?
Yeah, that was just me finishing up besides this bird.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
Do you want to talk about your next step?
Yeah, so the next step is we're going to be going over this hematite, but leaving a very small border. So we're going over it with sandstone first. You're going to notice over here if you tilt the camera
sure.
to this. Where basically the hematite is used to create this shadow effect that we have over here. So you can see the hematite peeking through on the sides, but we're going over it all with sandstone.
Cool.
So,
and
leaving a little small
are
amount.
you gonna dry or make sure you're...
So everything we need to be sure is absolutely dry before we go over with another layer. We don't want hematite and sandstone mixing.
For sure. Did you use the heat tool or did you let it air dry?
I actually let it air dry, but it was fine for me doing this whole section to go right in, because this was the first part I started with. Went here, then here. If I start here, it'll be fine.
It's like
Okay.
painting your nails. Like painting
Painting your nails. How while you're doing the rest.
Yeah.
Just enough time to dry. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, okay, while Ainsley moves into that, I will switch back over to mine and show you how to use the heat tool. So, here I have, you can kind of tell the difference between where Mom had painted up to and then the new section. We're going to see if we can get it kind of perfectly blended in with the other. So I'm going to take the heat tool here, which this is just your regular craft heat tool, and either setting should be fine. I'm going to do the fast one though, just to make it quicker. And there are a few little tiny bubbles, which I'm okay with since there's a lot of texture on this frame. And then as I dry, I might still decide, see how some of that dark brown is coming back up because of the paint pooling down in the crevices. I might just do one more topper with the sandstone before I move on into the next colors. So that's all I'm going to be doing. Sandstone, next step, I'll be mixing and not totally blending, just modeling together white gold and moonstone right here. So that's what I'll be doing on the next step.
I love how you can see the process. Like it's cool that you're like filling in a gap.
For
right? 'Cause
sure.
That's
It's a little
something
bit
people could do.
satisfying.
That's something people could do a lot too, is like, and I know like we're teaching a specific technique, but with just like with the paints, I don't know, I've definitely done it with things like you like color match like a chip in a table or something.
Mm-hmm.
And you just like use the paints to kind of just like patch it up a little bit, like similar to what you're doing with the frame, kind of just like filling the gap, patching up that little spot that wasn't done. And it's just interesting how you don't need to like do like an actual full-blown art project to like do something artistic.
For
No,
sure.
it could just
Yeah.
be fixing something. Like
So
that could be artistic in nature as well.
I guess for this step, three coats would be the ideal maybe even, do your 2 and then use the heat gun. You could just heat gun in between every single step. And that's just because we want it all to look like it's been, it's had the pearl formed over the frame. Ainsley, are you ready to go into your next step?
I'm using the same paintbrush and I just dipped it in some water and I dried it off the best I could. We want it as dry as possible. It's more optimal for our paints so they're not as runny. So just make sure that you're drying your brush in between colors. I will tell you if it's not necessary later
That's the
on.
same with my technique as well.
But yes. So we're going to be going in with sandstone now, and we're going to be going and kind of just like carving really close to the edges of what we already have done with the hematite here. So just give me a second as I shake up our paints.
I'm going to be a little loud for a sec with this dryer.
That is totally fine. And I'm just going to turn it off so you get to talk some more and I can discuss with you too.
Yeah, well, good, because that's what I want. That's what I like. I like discussion all the way around. So another thing that I thought was really interesting to step back into the rationalist side of things is a rationalist that I actually really like his name. It's kind of weird, but like, you know how some people's names you're just like, oh, it's really cool. This guy's name's Baruch Spinoza, and I thought it was pretty interesting. He's another rationalist thinker, like Rene Descartes, my favorite philosopher of the time period, and he delved into a different side of rationalist thinking, where it was a little bit more into like the materialist side of things and like kind of the world around us. He was a little bit more practical thinking than Rene Descartes was. And one thing that he focused on was like nature and how things exist outside of us and outside of our thinking minds. Because that's what Rene Descartes kind of like focused on. He thought like the only things that you could know for certain were things that kind of like existed in like the like ether, like not really tangible things. Like he thought like all of that could be misconstrued, or like you could be like technically like in a dream state.
Yes, I was about to bring that up with that like thought in mind, because there's a guy who literally, he was in a coma, he had a wife and kids and everything, and he thought it was real. He thought it was real, and then he woke up and out of this coma years later. Like, can you imagine how devastating that is? But it further proves the point that the only thing you can count on is that your mind is real. His mind was real the whole time.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that's honestly a really good point, and that's a lot of that's like actually a really good example that Spinoza and Descartes would absolutely love that you brought up, because they'd eat that up. They'd be like, yeah, like this is a real time example of that, like how you can be like deceived. Spinoza would give a little bit of a fight against that, because him wanting to get into the material world, he came up with a proof, like, of what he thought was like an explanation as to why we can believe things exist in the outside world that we interact with in our day-to-day lives.
So for this really quick, see how this is looking a lot more warm toned than the rest. So I'm just realizing that I need to add in more moonstone, since I had put a bit too much white gold. So I would err on the side of using more moonstone than white gold, but that's okay if you're noticing that it changed a little bit. You can actually take your paper towel and just go ahead and wipe away some of the white gold. I'm just picking that up just so I don't have to work against it, and I can just go in with the moonstone and kind of color match the rest. So that's all I'm doing currently, so you can keep going.
Oh, cool. Maybe we could take a little bit of time in a second to just address some of the comments. I don't know. I mean, I don't see the comments, but I see some some are going through.
Yeah, just they're saying thank you for the interesting conversation.
Oh, cool.
And not too much, so we're good.
Oh, nice. Well, I'll go a little bit more into Spinoza's attempt at a proof of why things exist outside of us and our thinking minds. And in this time period, a lot of these philosophers that were engaging in this, like, essentially what they were doing is they're like tweeting back and forth, but they were doing it with letters. So they would like write like a letter and like publish it, and then another philosopher, like a rationalist, would write a letter and they'd be like, oh, this is what I think, and an empiricist would be like, oh, this is why you're wrong, this is why I'm right, and they just go back and forth, kind of like tweeting at each other, and sometimes it get pretty heated. It's kind of funny. But one of the proof for material existence outside of the human mind. This time, like these guys being all pretty much Christian or somewhat religious in nature, he uses God as kind of like an overarching like term for everything. Just like an all-encompassing substance is how he explained it, where all other substances are a part of it. That's okay, I can talk a little.
Okay.
So anything that you see or you feel, including yourself, would be a part of this larger substance that Spinoza would later call God. And that had to do with, and that wasn't like necessarily like traditional like Christian God. It was kind of just like a term that he used as like everything's kind of like a painting, you know? And like we're all little like brush strokes in that giant painting, and that larger painting is called God. And he used that as an attempt to answer the question, like, can we like trust that the things around us and the things we interact with actually do exist? And he believed that you could trust that. And I think it's really cool because it's like, if you were to think about our project, right? Like that whole overarching God idea, that God substance would be like one of our paintings, and like we'd be like one of the leaves on the branches that Ainsley's putting on, or like a little drop of paint on the frame that you're working on.
I hope I'd be like a little flower portion, not just like the plain section where it's just one color.
Just a little nub of the branch.
Yeah. Or like, I don't know, just the dirt.
Yeah. or like the like the coffee droplet, like you set down your coffee mug too hard and there's a drop that just
Oh yeah.
flops
Or
onto
how about
the-
like the part of the painting that just like literally got sun bleached and it's just not
Yeah.
anymore.
It's all like faded and like
yeah.
can't really understand what it once was.
Real quick, I'm just doing every other kind of like polka dot type of sectioning of iridescent green and iridescent violet. I'll just be spreading that out, blow drying, and then I'll be, once that's dry, I'll add in a layer of this resin, and then using our UV lamp, which is technically a nail lamp, but we love it, it's the perfect size for our projects. I'll just be curing that. So that's all I'll be doing.
We should have brought out the UV flashlight.
I know.
Oh, did we get it?
Yeah,
We did.
Yeah, it came
That's
in.
good
It
for
came in.
smaller projects, though.
True. It is.
And Ainsley's making some good progress on her sandstone.
Yep, and I'll be doing a few layers of this. As you can see, it's, not fully covering initially, and that's pretty normal for this type of thing. So you'll just be having to do like a few different layers, and it doesn't really take that long after you get the initial design done.
I would suggest for you, so keep in mind with painting, and my dad would teach us this, like in painting houses. If you have a big wall, you don't want to paint with a small, like you'll see people on reels and stuff, and they're using the cutting brush to paint the whole wall, and it's making it streakier and taking a long time.
Yeah.
So if we find you, I can run inside and grab you one. if we find you a little bit bigger size of brush, that will cover more area on your second layer.
Right, I thought I brought one out here.
Right, we can go find it. But keep that in mind with your techniques, guys. If you're doing anything that requires a lot of filling in, don't use the small brush because that's just going to be way longer. It's going to make it streakier.
Yeah.
Think of rolling the wall with a paint roller instead of
Giant
using the
paint
cutting in
roller.
brush.
Yeah.
Don't want to do that. You're going to waste a lot of time in your life. So, but this paintbrush that Ainsley's currently using, this super thin one, that is perfect for the outlining. And then, again, just going in with a little bit bigger version of that to just fill in all of those strokes.
That's Ainsley's cutting brush right there.
Yeah, so right now she's cutting in the
Yeah.
corners of the wall. And then she's taking taking the paintbrush and then filling in the corners with the little bit larger one, which we're going to get her right now. I'm going to move this over to me and show again here how that's looking, and I'm going to zoom out. Okay, so that is pretty good. Oh, thank you. They just magically appeared for you, Ains.
That's how
There
all
you go.
stuff appears on Live. It's just magic.
That's crazy.
Okay, so right here I have the iridescent violet. I'm just gonna kind of, this one I'm not gonna dab and push as much. This one is a bit more of like a glaze type of quality. So I'm really just pulling and dragging this one. I'm doing it left-handed. I'm not left-handed. I'm doing it left-handed because that's just easier for you guys to not have to look at my hand.
I know something you don't know. I'm not left-handed.
Oh, that's Princess Bride.
Princess
Bride.
Bride.
That show
I
is
love
pretty
that
epic.
movie.
Okay, so
much.
that's all I need for the iridescent colors. I'm going to go in with the heat tool again. Make sure your paintbrush is in the water because if you're blowing the heat tool by your brush, that will all get fused into the brush, which will be very annoying. So heat tool, then I'll do the layer of resin.
Cool. Well, while they're both working on their projects, I can go into talk a little bit about our fourth and final philosopher that I plan on talking about today. And his name is George Berkeley, who is our second empiricist that we're talking about today. And it fits well because we just talked about Spinoza's proof for the material existence of things outside of our thinking mind. And George Berkeley also had a proof for this on the empiricist side of things. Which is, he just had an interesting perspective on it. And something that like makes sense if you think about it in a very creative way, we'll put it. So what he thought is he thought that material things existed only as much as like there was something or someone perceiving them. Isn't that kind of weird? Like,
I love that idea.
It's
which,
like-
by the way, is a little bit confirmed when you think of the slit theory.
oh yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
oh yeah, the double slit experiment.
Yeah, Sawyer will explain it better than I will for sure. But there is a theory where
Well, it's an experiment. They actually did it.
Yeah,
It's
not a theory.
Not a theory.
not a theory, it's real science.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody had a theory is what I meant to say.
Mm-hmm.
And no, it was an accident, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it was an accidental thing that happened, but
Yeah, I
they
can
noticed.
explain a little
Yeah,
bit about the
Sawyer
double slit
Sawyer will
experiment.
tell.
Yeah,
it.
this is the physics nerd in me. But so the double slit experiment was an experiment that eventually turned out to be how we figured out the nature of light. And usually with things like sound, we know are waves. Like sound travels like waves. And light usually travels like a particle. Like you're shooting a gun and it just shoots these little things, and we know that that these really small particles and that electrons jumping through different layers of the atom shoot off photons, and that's how light had a particle nature. And trying to prove that, they did an experiment called the double slit experiment, where essentially they had a radioactive element shoot towards a lead sheet. It was like lead or gold or something really, really dense. And there were 2 slits in this. And the crazy thing about it was when they did this experiment, they 100%, or almost 100%, you can't say 100% in science, but they were expecting to see 2 lines on the backdrop where they were like,
I'm gonna make him stop right before the cliffhanger.
oh, that's okay, that's okay.
The best part, it was about to be said, but I made this little hole here, so I'm just gonna quick use the sandstone. So what happened is I accidentally just pulled up a little of the paint. So if your resin's still wet, you still kind of have the opportunity to go in here and kind of fix any little mistakes that have happened and see how that's just flowing right over. I may even mix it in with a teeny bit of the moonstone, and I'm just gonna spread that around. You'll notice I was using the back of my brush as well. That works really great as a spreader if you don't want to use a bristle side. So see how that was able to just fill that in. All my resin is still wet, so that is flowing very nicely, covering any mistake. And then I'm going to go ahead and cure with the lamp. And then my project will be done.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, should we go to the...
Yeah, tell them the best part.
Figure that story, the best
The
part.
best part that I made you stop at.
Oh, that's okay. We love cliffhangers. But so they were expecting it to see 2 strips, right? Because they were shooting photons at a lead sheet with 2 slits in it. So, and light traditionally has acted like a particle, and that's what they were trying to figure out the nature of. And so they shot it through, and they're like, okay, there's gonna be 2 bands. And what happened was something called an interference pattern showed up on the back, which if you were to do the same exact thing with like water, it would show and how water like goes in waves.
Mm-hmm.
It would show that interference pattern. So they're like, okay, so light acts like a wave now. So they did the same experiment. They're like, we want to see what's going on. So they start observing the actual experiment itself. And when they did that, the act of them looking at the experiment with whatever instruments they used doing it changed how it acted, and the 2 lines showed up just like it would if
Like
you
it's
were
supposed to.
shooting particles like it was supposed to.
So literally the only thing that changed was somebody was viewing it or not.
Yep.
And that physically changed the science.
Yeah.
Which that's like the most exciting thing I've ever heard.
Max bringing up. See,
Bring that cup over
no,
here.
Yes. Here you go.
looks like the rationalist thinkers are gonna love Ainsley for her examples, and and the empiricists are gonna love yours for yours, because that's something George Berkeley would absolutely grab onto. He's like, look, see, observing something changes it. There's
Oh, right.
it is the act of observing that makes it alters it, right? And that's kind of a little bit of a proof about how observation has power over the physical world. And he would have just ate that up.
And me, Ainsley, and Sawyer were all kind of saying how it's always good to, when you have these theories and things that you're working with and listening to, it's always good to kind of just have not a super stark view one way or the other, because a lot of times things from both sides are going to be true. Mm-hmm. So and resonate true to you. I feel that way in politics. I feel like that in just a lot of aspects of life. We all kind of are that way.
Yeah.
I know not everybody's that way, but it is a great way to be just because you leave yourself open to possibilities, which as being an artist, that's always very important. Kind of being able to just think and change on a dime. Sometimes you'll make a mistake in your art and you'll have to kind of go with it. Like, for example, sometimes I'll be making designs like Ainsley and I maybe made the wing a little bit too big.
Yeah.
Well, I would just go with that and make the other wing a little bigger too to balance it out, type of thing. So it just works really well with the type of things we do personally.
Yeah.
And Ainsley, she, if you saw her, she was doing the little bit broader size of brush just before this to fill in her second layer.
For my leaves. I'm going to go back over the branches and I might do just one more on the leaves with the broader brush again. And then just with this, the larger surface areas. And then we're going to go into the rest of our colors.
And
which
that
is
should,
a lot
that should
easier.
be quick.
Yes, it will be way quicker than this portion.
So that was good that we were able to do my other technique while we kind of laid the groundwork for Ainsley's inlay. Those first steps you have to be really meticulous and perfect with because those are the opaque colors. Hematite, I guess, is a metallic, but since she did 2 layers, it had to be nice and kind of perfect. The others are a little bit more transparent, so moonstone and sands and the white gold. They
And
have
the iridescence too.
Yeah, I was gonna say that
Yeah,
next.
yeah.
So moonstone and white gold, they have a little bit more transparency, and then the iridescent violet and green, they have a lot of transparency. So that's kind of how we built the layers. Is we went from darkest and thickest to the lightest. I always like to know why we're doing things a certain way, so I wanted to let you guys know that's why we were doing it, is because we start with it being as opaque as possible and then moving kind of up in layers, and that's because you want your base layer to be thick that you'll see through, as those other layers build thinner. You'll still be able to see that thick background. So, and Ainsley, did you do your bird separately? Like, you still have to do a second layer on your bird?
I have to do a second layer on my bird still. I figured I'd do that because, outlining the bird is going to take a lot longer than just filling in the leaves a little bit more.
For sure. Cool.
I know your curing lay's been off for a bit. You might want to check it. It probably is pretty cured, right?
I cured it twice, so
Good.
And you don't really need to do this. I'll bring this back over since Ainsley's just filling in. I'll swing this back around. And obviously it's not as ideal that I did this section separately, but for the most part, when we kind of back it away and look at it from a distance, you can't super detect where I did it today. Here I'd say maybe a little bit, which if I wanted to, I could go in and just add a little bit more resin with that kind of fix that I did with the sandstone and moonstone. But I'm pretty happy overall with how the frame looks. Sometimes I like those little imperfections. And so, yeah, I love this frame. I think it's awesome. But I did cure it twice under the lamp. Probably just one little tap of the 120 seconds would have done it because it's not a ton of resin.
We always like to be safe though.
Oh yeah.
I was going to say, when you were talking about the process of going like dark to light, right? For what Ainsley's doing, like doing the hematite first, and then coming over top with like the lighter colors. What is kind of interesting about that is we can take it back to how the philosophers would have thought about that process itself.
Oh.
Right? Like a rationalist would say that like knowing like the nature of like how the paints work and stuff, like you kind of like came up with that idea and like you like reasoned to know that like the darker colors are going to be like a little bit harder to do, like second or whatever, like
Right.
and like and there would be your capability of reason and logic that led you to the final conclusion that that is the right process to do, or the best process to do for this specific project. And then an empiricist would say that it was just through trial and error that you did that.
Oh, interesting.
And
Which is because I didn't try it.
yeah.
You
And
know
like,
what I mean?
And like it might be
Which
like,
I guess maybe technically I did because I know a lot more about the paint.
yeah.
So I guess it's just how you look at it.
Yeah. And well, like that's what I'm saying is an empiricist would say,
Well,
that
you
it is
probably started with the rationalist point of view where you're just guessing based on what you understand about these paints, and then go into the other one and where you're actually doing your trial and error.
Yeah, totally. Another thing I was going to say is that empiricists would say that you came to the understanding of how the paints work, right, through your process of experimentation and time spent physically doing it. And the rationalists would say that you came to that through your understanding of the world, and what did help with that was your like understanding of how like the paints work. And this is where it gets a little tricky, is because that would also be drawn upon by your past experiences with
Right, that's the tricky part.
with that.
Which makes sense on how Ainsley was describing that it's kind of like a mixture of both. Again, like going back to our conversation about kind of having like a France type of stance on everything and just taking, not really being stark either way and
Yeah.
seeing what's good from each side. So Ainsley is perfecting her little sandstone layer. I am going to take this time to show how to perfect my little imperfection right here. So you saw me do it already with the sandstone and the moonstone when I kind of pulled up that little section, which is really hard to detect now. I'm going to get my resin. It's going to be wet while I do this. So I'm just going to get a little bit of this resin out. And I can just spread it with the bottle tip right here. And basically I'm just trying to hide this little dark patch because it's kind of creating a little bit of a line. Then I'm going to take the sandstone here and drip it on the wet resin. Just one little drop should do it. And then the moonstone as well. So that sandstone and moonstone are kind of like our main players. That's why you only need those two. Obviously, if it was only those two, you wouldn't get any of those purple and green flecks throughout the painting or throughout the frame, which that's what we want ultimately. But it's okay if there's like a little dull patch, kind of like we were saying with me not wanting to be the faded dull patch in the painting of a life.
Oh yeah.
So again, with the back of the paintbrush, just going to dab that out. And I may have a little bit too much here, so I can actually pull it up with the paper towel just because I think it was a little bit thick, and I'm being like major perfectionist here just since I have the time. Since I know Ainsley's the ultimate perfectionist, it's gonna give me lots of time to do stuff. So that looks really good. And then I'm just gonna cure it under the lamp for 120, which is probably it's not too long. It just doesn't need that much time, but I'm just gonna do it just in case.
And you guys won't even have that kind of issue. It's just because we did it in a patchy kind of form. So
Yeah.
you guys could see it beforehand. Okay, so I have this base layer done. Besides, this bird needs his second layer. And so we're going to actually be going in with our other colors now. And I will show you what to do for that. I'm just using my detail brush still. And then we will also be using a little bit thicker of a brush. Still small, but thicker than this detail brush. And again, making sure that these brushes are nice and dry in between.
Do you need me to open some paint bottles for you?
Yeah, that'd be good. It'd help
Okay.
speed up the process.
You want moonstone next?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And white gold.
Mm-hmm. I'm just gonna test with my finger really quickly because it's very important that the sandstone is not wet. So I'm just gonna test that this is dry here. And nothing is picking up so far, so we should be good to go in with our moonstone now. I just have to clear this tip really quickly to make sure that it can come out.
I did the white gold one already. I'll do that with your rest so you don't have to waste that time.
Thank you. Okay, now this, we're gonna actually just be going and covering all of the sandstone with this moonstone color. But it doesn't have to be nearly as precise because you already have that base layer going in. And I'm just gonna probably do 2 layers of this, but this is gonna go a lot quicker than.
And Ainsley, I
The other
personally
ones.
think you should use the larger brush. Is there a reason why you're using the
It's
smaller?
because I'm getting along the edge
And the middle at the same time?
and the middle at the same time. It's just easier. I just put a glob in the center and then I kind of pull
Okay.
it out of the center.
And this is a little bit less important to like cover everything, right? Like
Yes.
it might even be a little bit better to not cover everything.
But as you can tell, I just kind of glob at the center and then I'm just pulling it out from the center to cover the sandstone.
Mhm.
And we'll be going over for a couple layers.
And
but-
you're doing white gold after moonstone?
Yes.
Okay, so that is one difference between Ainsley and I's. Since I had a larger surface, I did them at the same time, since they could be modeled. But probably since that's such a small little area, she's going to do them separate.
But yeah, this goes way faster for this portion because we're not carving out that edge there.
Awesome. Well, maybe while Ainsley's doing that, your project's looking pretty good though, Mac, right? Like
Thank
you're,
you.
like you're
I'm done.
Oh, sweet. I mean, yeah, like honestly from here, can't even tell the difference between,
Where the new patch was?
yeah.
Oh, good.
Like I think from a distance it helps a lot, but also like you were saying earlier, if you like when you make mistakes or whatever, or like what you'd consider a mistake, you just roll with it, and you just like maybe you put a little bit too much Victorian gold in it,
Right.
and that like then there's lots of things you can do. You can like keep layering it, or you can like work the Victorian gold through to make it look a little bit more even. I think that's pretty cool. Can I ask you to do something kind of silly?
Sure.
Don't show
You
anyone.
showed it. Oh, don't show
anyone.
it?
Not
You
till
want it
it's
to be
not till.
secret?
Yeah, you might need to fold the edges of the paper. To,
Oh my gosh.
put it in
Okay. Sounds good.
It's pretty silly. But anyways, okay. So probably one of the last things that, as we're approaching the end, that I want to talk about, is the different kind of reasoning that that rationalists and empiricists use is actually 2 very different kinds of reasoning. And I mentioned Sherlock Holmes earlier towards the beginning of the show. And Sherlock Holmes would be a good example of a rationalist because he uses what's called deductive reasoning. And deductive reasoning is when you use logic and reason, very similar to a rationalist, to approach things in almost like a mathematical and methodological process. So if I were to a good example of it would be I'm trying to think of a good example. I didn't have one prepared. A good example would be
Do you need me to look something up?
No, I don't. I shouldn't need you to look something up. So
Okay.
sometimes I just get a lot of ideas in my head, and I gotta like pick one. But a good idea of this would be, like, I don't know. I guess as a kid, I always liked setting things on fire, and let's be honest, I still kind of do. So like a good idea would be if I were to like reason to the idea that if I were to hold a flame by something that's flammable, that thing that's flammable would set ablaze, right? Like that's me like just definitionally speaking of those terms, right? Something flammable will light on fire if it is exposed to a flame. And an empiricist uses another method of reasoning called inductive reasoning, which relies on the fact that, for the most part, the future will resemble the past. And what that means, in this example of setting something on fire, would be that in the past, when I have striked a match on the side of a matchbox, that match has set ablaze, right? So in the future, we'll continue to do so. And that shows that sort of experimentation side of things, where how heavily they rely on experiences that you've had and things that you've seen and felt tangibly, rather
real
than
quick
just thinking
here.
about it.
Now that I did that layer of moonstone and that's covering, I'm just going to be going in with the white gold on one edge of it. So I'm just going to do only one side of it. You're going to notice I'm just choosing to do the bottom side. We don't really want them, you don't want to cover the whole thing because you still want to see these other colors. So we're just going to do really quick. This part's pretty fast with the white gold.
Cool. One thing Mackie and I were talking earlier, I don't know, like, what do you think, Mac, about like, what do you think you do? What do you think you do mostly throughout your day? Right? It's like that difference between like deductive and inductive reasoning, and I can explain it again if you didn't fully understand what I was saying. But like, do you think in terms of like ideas and kind of like a more like logical process, or is it more of like an experience based like I don't know.
Just depends on whether I'm stressed or not. If
Really?
I'm feeling myself and good and like I haven't I'm got my stress and anxiety under control, then I feel like I'm all experience based.
Yeah.
I think that when I'm feeling stressed and that just random pressure, that's when I feel all 100% logical. Am I doing this right? Am I super analytical? So I think that's how I would describe. So both, just depending on how good I am that day.
That's kind of a really, really funny but like useful insight, because I don't know, I kind of feel like just from like studying a lot about like Descartes and Spinoza versus like empiricists like John Locke and Berkeley. The rationalists are kind of stress balls. They kind of shows that like anxiety.
Which is
the
funny
anxiety
because you
level.
would think that it was opposite.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, but it's almost because we just like care so much, I think. And like have that internal thought process all the time.
Yeah, I mean it definitely is, and I think honestly one thing specifically about this that I think is the reason, or is part of the reason for that, is because of how like certain they feel like they need to be about knowledge, right? Rationalists feel like you have to know 100% without a doubt that something is true, and the empiricists take a little bit more of a backseat, lax like role of it, and they're like, you can have some doubts, but like you can just go with it, you know?
Right. All right, next up here, we're just going in with our iridescent purple, and I'm just going to be doing a stripe down the center for that part right next to where I did my white gold, and then after that I'm going to do the next stripe with the iridescent green on the opposite end of the white gold next to the iridescent purple. And so that's also just going to be really quick. You're just basically drawing a nice little line, making sure you're getting that color in there down the leaves.
One thing I really like about your project, Ainsley, is I think the stencil helps with this,
Yeah.
but how like even it looks. Like it looks like, I don't know, just very like pleasantly symmetrical in a way.
Really?
To me, like you know what I mean. Like it's kind of like a mirrored symmetry.
Right,
and like,
right.
That's what using a stencil is gonna really help with.
It definitely does.
But like of course like freehanding things is also beautiful in its own right. But if you're the kind of
Absolutely.
person that like appreciates symmetry, like stencil might be the way to go.
So
Unless you're really good.
This was fun to see because I thought that Ainsley had just layered every single layer like we did for the large painting. So it's nice to see that you kind of did a little bit more artistic, yet obviously easy to recreate.
Yeah.
But that you didn't just layer them all. You're doing somewhat of a, you know.
Right. There's a specific spot that each color is going. And then after this, we'll be basically done. We'll just have to do some resin, like Mackie did earlier.
And we can even use the heat tool on this last
Yeah,
step
we
too,
probably
so we can
will
go,
want to.
go right into
So
the
that
resin.
it can dry.
Should we while Ains is finishing this, should we show the little gag?
Sure, I'll give it to you. You ready?
All right, so this is Rene Descartes. This is the rationalist, one of the rationalists we've been talking
Hold
about.
it by underneath your chin. There you go. So I printed, and I ripped the corner, but it also kind of makes it look a little bit more like...
Oh, like old and more
That
more
was an
antique-y a little
accident.
bit. It's a black and white photo. Come on.
For real.
I don't even think they do. They even have? I mean, this is probably not like they probably not.
What time period? What time period is it?
17th century.
Blasting this with the
16th,
heat gun.
17th century.
I don't think, but
15,
they had...
1600s.
I'm not sure when the photograph was invented.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is of course a portrait, but it's, I don't know. I think it's interesting. I also, this is the guy who got me into philosophy. Isn't that weird?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yep.
That's so interesting.
Highly recommend reading his meditations on the first philosophy.
That's super cool.
Very interesting and insightful. Don't take it too
Okay,
literally,
let's dry.
though.
Right.
Because he kind of went insane doing that, and I don't want anyone to go insane.
Ainsley is doing her final step, guys.
Yeah, so we're just going to be globbing on the resin. I have our resin brush that Mackie would have been using earlier. And we're just going to be covering all of it.
Nice.
Super easy. But yes, definitely want a resin-specific brush so that you're not ruining all of your brushes.
And you're making this somewhat thin of a coat?
Yeah, we'll build it up a little bit. And I just recommend you build it up until you like the thickness and how it looks.
Do you think?
Also, since this is super like this texture of the brush stroke is noticeable, sometimes it's best to like let that set for a couple seconds so that you don't notice that as much when you resin it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And two things I think might help with that are adding more resin.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
And potentially like lightly heating it up. Because the heat's not going to cure the resin. Only the UV light will. But what it will do is it will heat it up, and then it will like allow it, because when you heat it up, it's going to become a little bit more liquidy.
What he was teaching about today.
Yeah.
His rationalist thought process.
Yeah, this is my rationalist thought process, but it's gonna make the resin a little bit more viscous.
It makes it much thinner when you get your resin hot.
Yep, and then
you don't need to cure. You don't need to cure in between.
Well, we will. I just want it to be slightly thicker.
I'm
for
just
this
saying
layer.
that wasn't necessary that they did a cure right there. You were able to just add right onto the resin.
Oh yeah. Like
Yeah.
you don't need to cure the first layer.
Yep.
Is what she's asking. Yeah.
You can make it thicker immediately.
Yep.
Which I think this looks good. I think we can just cure it and
I think so
say
too.
goodbye. And does that all fit underneath a nail lamp, or maybe
No,
one
we have
side?
to do this in sections. That's what was done on your frame too, is that it was done in sections.
Should we just stare at Renee Descartes for the next couple minutes while we
Sounds good. So Ainsley is curing that top area, which it will, that purple, you'll see it bleeding down into here. So you'll notice some of this will cure, but this isn't, none of that UV light, some of it, see how it's reflecting on my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it is, but you want to make sure to get it real thick underneath that light,
Oh,
or else
yeah.
it'll take a little while. So how much on each side?
I'm gonna just hit it with 120 seconds since I did a thicker layer and I don't want it to be sticky.
Mm-hmm.
So
We got
You could also
240
probably-
seconds to say the coolest, most life-changing stuff to the people watching right now. So we're ready, set, go.
Pretty much we can just do a recap during this time. Just about the overarching like topic. So
And say his name one more time.
Renee Descartes.
Okay.
Yeah, spelled Descartes or whatever, but it's
Ah,
French.
nice.
So
Cool.
Rene Descartes is this guy. He is our main rationalist thinker that we were talking about. And just to recap, rationalism is the method of thought that was
Can you hand
popular.
me him?
Yes, popular in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, so pre-industrial era, where people thought, rationalist thinkers thought that when you came to knowledge, you did so through reason and logic within your mind. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have empiricists like John Locke and George Berkeley, who thought that when you came to knowledge, you came to it through your experiences and experimentation, and you were born with pretty much nothing, and all of your knowledge comes from your experience in the world. And I think that, I don't know, it's pretty cool to be able to see both sides, right? And like we were saying earlier, it's kind of like, I mean, it's kind of like a spectrum, right? Like we use parts of rationalist thinkers, or we use like methods of similar to rationalist thinkers every day and empiricist thinkers every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're somewhere on the spectrum, and it's just kind of cool that like most things just come down to balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like even in art, like there's always balance in
Especially.
something. And we talked a little bit about the rationalists kind of being a little crazy. Cool crazy though. Crazy we like. So maybe keep yourself sane, delve into the empiricist side of things if you are more prone to being rationalist.
For sure. That's such a fun way to think about it. Yeah, this was a really fun project. I'm surprised we were able to tie it in so well because I wasn't seeing it at first, like when we were prepping, but today it totally came together. And I think it's always fun when we're not like completely prepared. It kind of forces us to think very, very much in a raw form and think on our toes a little bit, which I always like those moments. So I'm sure you guys appreciate that as well. And I personally love the art projects that came out.
Oh yeah.
Oh, somebody's asking some questions.
Oh cool.
Maybe I'll hand this to Sawyer.
Yeah,
you
I
can
can
pop
check
some of
these.
the comments up there maybe and see what people are saying.
Sure. Let's
You can switch
see.
it to our full screen mode, because I don't have a great view anymore.
Yeah, this one.
Sure. Yes.
You put our
So-
full screen.
So Pat Moore asked, can you use these paints on clay pots or do you need to seal them?
Real quick, I'm trying to put us all on screen.
Oh yes, right here. There we go. So let's answer.
Paint on clay pots or
Yep.
what? Sorry, I was focused on getting
Oh,
our screen.
can you
share.
use these paints on clay pots or do you need to seal them?
No, so that's what's so amazing about our paints, and I'll take this opportunity quick to talk about the qualities of our paints. They are water-based, water-soluble, so if you're wanting to clean up, always clean up with water. But they are a resinous paint, so that essentially is like a sealant in and of itself. It's kind of like using like a really nice spray paint or any type of lacquer or enamel finish. So that's the type of paint that you're using when you're using our paints. And so when you paint them on a pot, think of that as your full coat. You don't need any top layer, no seal or anything. And we've tested it outside. We actually tested it on concrete.
The story is pretty funny.
Yeah, the story is funny, but we can say that another day. But we tested it on concrete, and it was there for 2.5 years.
It's
It's
probably still there, honestly.
Half a year into
right?
probably half a year into our lease of a 3-year lease, and it stayed for all that whole time, and that's in all weather, snow, rain, all sorts of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll
We can
hold
just
up our
show them the
projects. We've got our pearl frame with the resin topper and Ainsley's inlaid frame, faux inlaid with a resin topper as well.
Oh, we missed Taya's comment.
Yeah.
She said we literally did talk about this earlier, where it was the if a tree falls in the forest, is anyone around to hear it? That's probably went back when we were talking about Berkeley.
Yeah.
And Mackie and I talked about this before, but yeah, he would say doesn't even exist because no one was even there to look at it.
Definitely food for thought for everybody
Yep.
watching. So maybe do some self-discovery and see like maybe some type of theories that you have.
Yeah.
Also, you can totally share with us. We always love to hear people's theories, anything dealing with art or philosophy at all. We all are a great, big, huge creative think tank here.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll appreciate any of those thoughts that you guys want to share.
Oh yeah,
So
Absolutely.
is that all we have for today? Should we
That's
say goodbye?
everything.
think so.
All right. Go ahead and finish this
Yeah.
up, Beans.
So we're super glad that you guys were able to join us today. We really hope you enjoyed these 2 different looks that you can do to your frames. But also remember, this doesn't just have to be on frames. You could just do it on literally anything you wanted to. That's wood. So you could even do this to a dresser if you were very patient to resin the whole entire dresser. But basically anything that's wood, it's going to work on really well. And probably other things as well. But we just know for sure for the wood. But yeah, we're glad that you could join us today and that we could share with you Sawyer's thoughts and some of our thoughts that we were able to add in. So thank you for coming, and we'll be back in another 2 weeks with something else fun for you guys to learn.
Thank you.
Thank you.